The Last Man Standing. In a modest house in the Rudow district of southern Berlin, an elderly man lived quietly for decades, holding secrets from one of history's darkest chapters. His name was Rochus Misch. Until his death in September 2013 at the age of 96, he remained the last surviving witness to Adolf Hitler's final hours in the Führerbunker. 4 years after the war, Misch rarely spoke publicly. But as the decades passed and other witnesses died, he began to share his story. A story that would challenge simplified narratives and force us to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, complicity, and the banality of evil. This is not a story of revelations that change historical facts. This is something more unsettling, the testimony of a man who served Hitler faithfully for 5 years, who witnessed the end of the Third Reich, and who, until his final days, remained unrepentant. Rochus Misch died on September 5, 2013. His death closed a chapter of living testimony from the Nazi regime's inner circle. But his words, preserved in interviews, and his memoir, The Last Witness, continue to provoke debate. What did he reveal? And why does his testimony remain so controversial? The making of a bodyguard. Rochus Misch was born on July 29, 1917, in Alt-Schalkowitz, a small village near Appeln in the German province of Silesia, now part of Poland. He was an orphan, raised by his grandfather, who pulled him from school after 8 years, insisting the boy learn a trade. Misch trained as a painter and decorator, a skilled craftsman with no apparent interest in politics. In 1937, at age 20, Misch received a call-up notice for military service. Like many young German men of his generation, he faced a choice. He joined the SS Verfügungstruppe, the predecessor to the Waffen-SS, rather than the regular Wehrmacht. His reasoning, as he would later explain, was simple. He saw the SS as a bulwark against Bolshevism, not as a vehicle for Nazi ideology. This distinction, between fighting communism and serving Hitler, would become a refrain throughout Misch's later testimony. It was a rationalization many former SS members employed, separating their military service from the regime's crimes. Whether Misch truly believed this or used it as psychological cover remains an open question. Fate intervened in 1939. During the German invasion of Poland, Misch was seriously wounded. While recovering, his height, over 1.8 meters, or nearly 6 feet, and his status as a wounded veteran made him an ideal candidate for a new assignment. In May 1940, he was transferred to the Führerbegliedert Kommando, Hitler's personal bodyguard unit. Suddenly, the young painter from Silesia found himself in the dictator's inner circle. Inside the Führer's world. What was Hitler like as a boss? This is the question that made Misch's testimony both fascinating and deeply problematic. For decades after the war, Misch offered a portrait of Hitler that contradicted the monster of historical record, or rather, complicated it in ways that made many uncomfortable. Misch served as bodyguard, courier, telephone operator, and general assistant from 1940 until Hitler's death in 1945. He traveled with the Führer to the Alpine retreat at Berchtesgaden, to the Wolfslair headquarters in East Prussia, and finally to the Führerbunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. He was present for countless meetings, meals, and mundane moments. He watched Eva Braun organize parties. He poured tea for Leni Riefenstahl. He stood guard while history's most consequential decisions were made behind closed doors. And in all that time, Misch insisted, he saw only a man, quiet, polite, and considerate to his staff. In interviews, Misch described Hitler as completely normal, a man with nice words, who treated his immediate staff well. This was Hitler the boss, not Hitler the Führer. It was Hitler who asked after the health of his telephonist's wife, not Hitler who ordered the extermination of 6 million Jews. To his critics, Misch's testimony represented a dangerous minimization of Hitler's evil. To historians, it offered something else. A reminder that monsters are not always monstrous in every moment, and that the perpetrators of atrocities often appear disturbingly ordinary to those around them. This was Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil, Made Flesh, an SS man who spent 5 years in Hitler's service and emerged describing him as a decent employee. The Witness to Catastrophe. On January 16, 1945, as the Third Reich collapsed under the weight of Allied advances, Hitler and his inner circle retreated underground. Misch and the rest of the Führer's personal staff moved into the Führer bunker, a claustrophobic concrete tomb beneath the Reich Chancellery garden. Misch's role became critical. As the chief telephone operator, he directed all communications flowing in and out of the bunker. Every desperate order, every plea for reinforcements that would never come, every report of advancing Soviet troops, all passed through his switchboard. On July 20, 1944, Misch had monitored the telephone lines after the failed assassination attempt on Hitler's life. Now, in the bunker's final days, he witnessed the regime's death throes from his post at the switchboard. On April 29, 1945, Misch was present when Adolf Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief civil ceremony. He recalled wondering how he should address the new Frau Hitler. It was, he said, a moot question. Within 24 hours, both would be dead. On April 30th, Misch stood in the hallway of the bunker. Hitler had locked himself in his private quarters with Eva Braun. The waiting staff knew what was coming. Misch recalled the moment with precise, detached clarity. Misch was among the first to see the bodies. Hitler slumped over a table, having shot himself. Eva Braun beside him on a sofa, her knees drawn to her chest, killed by cyanide. He watched as others wrapped Hitler's body and carried it past him to be burned in the Reich Chancellery garden. For Misch, this was not a moment of horror or relief, but simply duty fulfilled. He remained at his post, the faithful telephonist, even as the world he had served collapsed around him. The unrepentant soldier. 3 days after Hitler's suicide, as Soviet forces closed in, Misch finally fled the bunker. He was quickly captured and spent the next 9 years in Soviet prisoner-of-war camps in Kazakhstan and Siberia. He returned to Berlin in 1954, to the same working-class neighborhood where he had lived during the war, to the same house he would occupy until his death. He ran a painting and wallpaper business. He married his sweetheart Gerda, whom he had wed on New Year's Eve 1942. They had a daughter, Brigitta. Life continued. But Misch never expressed regret for his service to Hitler. This is what made his testimony so controversial and, to many, so troubling. In numerous interviews over the decades, he remained consistent. He had been a soldier doing his duty, nothing more. When pressed about the Holocaust, about the murder of 6 million Jews, about the concentration camps and the gas chambers, Misch retreated into claims of ignorance. He acknowledged knowing about Dachau and concentration camps in general, but claimed to have no idea of the scale of the atrocities. This willful blindness was not unique to Misch. It was a pattern among many Germans after the war, a collective amnesia about what they knew and when they knew it. Yet Misch's position was unique. He stood closer to Hitler than almost anyone for 5 years. He overheard conversations, observed the comings and goings of SS chiefs like Himmler, watched the machinery of the Third Reich operate from the inside. His claim of ignorance strained credulity. It was moral relativism masquerading as wisdom, the rationalization of a man who had chosen loyalty over conscience and refused to reconsider that choice even decades later. The testimony and its impact. After remaining largely silent for decades, Misch became more public in his final years. In 2005, French journalist Nicolas Bouquier conducted extensive interviews with him, resulting in a biography published in 2006. An English translation, Hitler's Last Witness, appeared in 2008. These books brought Misch international attention. He served as a consultant on the 2008 Hollywood film Valkyrie about the failed assassination plot against Hitler. He commented on the 2004 German film Downfall, calling it Americanized, and noting that while it captured important facts, it exaggerated details for dramatic effect. He recalled that people in the bunker spoke quietly, not with the hysteria depicted in the film. Misch regularly received visitors at his Berlin home, granting interviews to journalists, historians, and documentarians. He gave walking tours at the site of the former bunker, introducing himself to tour groups. "Hello. Hello. Don't you know me? I'm Misch. I was there." Some found his testimony valuable, a rare first-hand account from Hitler's immediate circle. Historians noted that his memoir, while lacking deep insight into Hitler's psychology, provided useful details about daily life in the dictator's headquarters. Others found him deeply troubling. The Sunday Express described him in 2003 as the most unrepentant and unapologetic Hitler supporter you could ever have the misfortune to meet. The Toronto Star noted in 1995 that raucous Mischa's eyes still take on a special shine whenever he speaks his name, Hitler's name. Interestingly, Misch showed more emotion discussing the fate of Joseph and Magda Goebbels' 6 children, murdered by their parents in the bunker, than he did discussing the Holocaust. In one interview, he was nearly moved to tears over their deaths. This selective empathy revealed much about Mischa's moral universe. He could grieve for specific individuals he knew, but remained detached from the suffering of millions he never met. The uncomfortable truth. So what did raucous Misch actually reveal? Not secrets that altered our understanding of historical events. The basic facts of Hitler's final days were already well established through other testimonies and documents. Misch confirmed what was known: the wedding, the suicide, the burning of the bodies, the chaos of the bunker's final hours. What Misch revealed was something more subtle and perhaps more important: how ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary evil. Misch was not an ideologue. He joined the SS to fight communism, not because he had read Mein Kampf or attended Nazi rallies. He was assigned to Hitler's bodyguard because of his height and his wounds, not because of political zeal. He served faithfully because that was what soldiers did. They followed orders and remained loyal to their commanders. And therein lies the revelation. Mischa's story demonstrates how a system of absolute evil can function with the participation of people who do not see themselves as evil. He was the faithful servant, the dutiful soldier, the man who just pressed buttons at the switchboard and asked no questions when it was best to ask none. This was not the banality of evil in the abstract. This was its human face: polite, ordinary, unexceptional. Misch spent 5 years facilitating the communications of a regime that murdered millions, and he emerged with his self-image as a good soldier intact. His testimony forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. If Misch could serve Hitler and see nothing monstrous, what does that say about human nature? If he could witness the end of a genocidal regime and feel no shame, only pride in his service, what does that say about the power of loyalty and obedience? The historical record. Historians have approached Mischa's testimony with appropriate caution. While his eyewitness account of the bunker's final days is valuable, his interpretations and justifications must be understood in context. Mischa's claim that Hitler never discussed the final solution in his presence is likely true in the narrow, literal sense. Hitler was known to be careful about discussing extermination policies explicitly, even with his inner circle. But the idea that someone in Mischa's position, monitoring communications and overhearing conversations for 5 years, remained genuinely ignorant of the Holocaust is difficult to accept. Roger Morehouse, who wrote the foreword to Mischa's English-language memoir, noted that while the book lacked deep insights, it offered a rare and fascinating insight into the Third Reich's inner sanctum through its accumulation of details and observations. Misch was, Morehouse observed, as close to being a fly on the wall as one could get. Yet that fly on the wall chose to see and remember only what suited his post-war narrative. His memoir and interviews are exercises in selective memory, carefully constructed to preserve his self-image as an apolitical soldier who happened to work for history's greatest criminal. The final accounting. In his final years, Misch remained physically imposing, his tall frame and broad shoulders still suggesting the SS bodyguard he once was. He lived in the same modest house in Berlin where he had resided since 1942, a survivor in a city transformed beyond recognition from the capital of the Third Reich. When Misch died in 2013, obituaries around the world grappled with how to characterize him. Was he a historical witness providing valuable testimony? An unrepentant Nazi? A cautionary tale about loyalty and complicity? Perhaps he was all of these things. His daughter, Brigitte Jacob Engelken, notably devoted herself to supporting Jewish causes after the war, a striking counterpoint to her father's refusal to express remorse for his service to Hitler. The Associated Press obituary called him Adolf Hitler's devoted bodyguard. The New York Times noted his pride in his service. NPR highlighted his continued loyalty to the boss. Each captured a different facet of a man who remained, in his own mind, faithful to the end. What, ultimately, are we to make of Rokas Misch's testimony? He revealed no hidden documents, no secret conversations that changed our understanding of the Third Reich. He provided no smoking gun, no dramatic confession that reshaped the historical narrative. What he provided was something both less and more: a window into how complicity works, how ordinary people participate in monstrous systems while maintaining their sense of themselves as decent, duty-bound individuals. Misch's story is important not because of what it tells us about Hitler. We already knew Hitler was a genocidal dictator. It's important because of what it tells us about the people around Hitler, the functionaries and servants and guards who made the system work. These were not all fanatics or sadists. Many, like Misch, were simply soldiers following orders, staff members doing their jobs, individuals who compartmentalized the evil around them and focused on their immediate duties. This is the uncomfortable truth Misch forces us to confront. Most people in positions of complicity do not see themselves as complicit. They see themselves as Misch saw himself, as loyal, dutiful, professional. Today, the site of the Führer bunker is an anonymous parking lot in Berlin. A small information panel marks the spot where Hitler died and where Rokas Misch stood at his post, faithfully operating the switchboard until the very end. There are no grand memorials here, no statues or monuments. The Germans made a deliberate choice to let this place fade into urban anonymity, to deny it any power as a shrine. Yet people still come, still search for the exact location, still try to understand what happened in those final days. Rokas Misch's testimony has become part of the historical record, not because it revealed shocking truths, but because it revealed an ordinary truth: that great evil is often perpetrated and facilitated by ordinary people who never see themselves as evil. In the end, perhaps that is the real revelation, not what Misch told us about Hitler, but what he told us about ourselves and the human capacity for rationalization, for loyalty in the service of atrocity, for moral blindness in the face of genocide. Rokas Misch remained unrepentant until his death. His testimony stands as both a historical document and a moral warning. This is how it happens, this is how ordinary people participate in extraordinary crime, and this is how they justify it to themselves afterward. The world was not so much stunned by what Misch revealed as troubled by what his testimony reflected back at us: the disturbing ordinariness of complicity, the banality of evil made manifest in an aging painter from Silesia who spent 5 years serving history's greatest monster and never saw anything wrong with it.